Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. To some and peace out to the rest of you. As an educator, I've had really bad classes, really bad sections of students. I've had cases where the students are wrong, the culture's wrong, the whole mindset's wrong, I'm right, and that's the end of it. And if I compromise on that, I'll have to compromise every day. And if I don't, then I'll have to fight. Argue with them. And they will gang up, making noise and arguing, and they will not go by what is right. In every case that this has happened, I was either dealing with lost niggas in the United States or the spoiled, lazy, arrogant Bedou here in the Gulf. Both are loud, both are always wrong, both interrupt you and don't listen to anything. Both don't listen when you do tell them something. Even when they've been quiet, they don't listen, and then they go afoul of what you've told them before, and then they want to debate and argue about the penalties and the punishments, the consequences. They want to negotiate away the consequences sometimes, or just outright tell you that you're not going to apply them. That's the end of it. When this happens and they gang up on you, there's one thing that many educators fall victim to, and that is that they forget about the students who are not causing the ruckus, who are paying attention and who are ready to learn and absorb the minute that things calm down to where information can be imparted again. And what is sad is that in all the noise, the ones who are innocent by definition must fade into the background. You may not even see them as the reckless students are up out of their chairs and coming up to you arguing, and you really may not physically be able to see the quiet ones if enough of the reckless ones get up and walk up to you and surround you. You wouldn't be able to see who was quiet and who wasn't. And so you really may be unaware of who's innocent. I'm here now to give a shout out to those who didn't cause the trouble. The ones we know and the ones we don't know. The ones we don't know are in their homes. They're looking after their husbands, looking after their kids, and the husband's able to do their part without a whole lot of extra stress from inside the home. I can't speak for the outside, but without much extra stress from the inside of the home, the husband's able to do their part because the wives allow it. And they got babies, or raising nieces and nephews for that matter. They both are able to together raise them right so that they don't stress out the parents and drain everything. They're just not enough to build a community, let alone a nation. But they're there. Shout out to Lisa Leslie. She would not take the bait and tarnish or go in on a dead man who could not defend himself, even though he was already acquitted. Shout out to others like her who would not do this. And we do not really blame anyone that goes in on men who really are guilty, as long as the evidence or outright proof, better yet, will show that they are guilty and exculpatory evidence is not sufficient to explain it away. We don't generally go after folks like that. People did not mourn when Timothy McVeigh died. The good deeds that he did in his life were not remembered by any of us. No, none of them were. Not Terry Nichols was remembered for cooperating, but no, the good deeds were not remembered by any of us. Any good thing that Timothy McVeigh did in his life is forgotten. He may not even be able to remember them anymore. I remember one of the last things that my grandfather told me with a sober mind was that what it meant to be human was not really a biological question anymore. It was a moral question because someone like him, um, someone like him, meaning Timothy McVeigh, was obviously not fully human. So that being said, unfortunately, for whatever reason, I don't know what it is, many people lose their humanity, and well, some reasons I do know. They get traumatized. And see, other people's trauma can traumatize you when you know enough about it. Those who counsel the traumatized become traumatized themselves because they have to deal with it in order to counsel. I myself have come to a point where I don't really want to live very long because of the trauma that other people have had to go through, and I don't counsel them through trauma. I just know the stories. So imagine what others are going through. Those who try to help for a living the traumatized victims. They are going through more than what many of us know, and consequently, what their victims have been through, requiring them to get counseling. Well, this is even further beyond us and our knowledge, our understanding. But there are those who don't participate in this. Your oppressor comes along and they don't turn on you to try to curry favor with the oppressor, but we don't know who they are in many cases. There are actually plenty of sisters, even in the States, that don't hate us. They may have been told that we were dangerous, and yet for whatever reason they still don't hate us. They doubt the propaganda. There have been those that actually will try to go to bat for us. They may want certain things from us that we simply don't have, but they don't turn around and make that frustration into a hatred against us. There are sisters that, yeah, they want more from black men, but they look at what we don't have and they say, you know what, he didn't rob himself. That's not what happened. Somebody robbed him. He could not inherit because somebody robbed his dad, and before that his grandfather, and before that his great grandfather, and before that his grandfather's grandfather, and it goes back all the way to where we were back home. There are sisters who actually they feel traumatized by having to grow up black, starved out as a community, but they don't look at every black man and blame them. They do exist. I'm not going to say it's our job to find them. They've been snatched up. They're just not around anymore. I mean, they're not available anymore. We can't count on them to help more people build more families because they've got their family. But we do need to give a shout out to them. And this is going to draw the line further, and here's why I say it. The ones who are ratchet call them pick-me's. And when we give a shout out to them and show them respect, the ratchets come out even further and call them pick-me's and get even angrier. Shout out to the ones, not only to Kendra D, but the silent ones like Kendra D. Shout out to not only Lisa Leslie, but the silent ones like Lisa Leslie, who didn't have a microphone held up, who don't even have time to be on social media. Shout out to them. See, we know someone like that. And I would say that when we know someone like it, you don't have to publicize their name per se. But shout out to them and let them know, privately and publicly, my respect goes to you, my hat goes off to you, because I know what you have and what you have not done. Shout out to Asada Muhammad. When are you going to put some content out? They already calling you a pick-me. Why not go ahead and roar like the lioness? The hyenas can only cackle. And I could do another recording on why the hyena analogy is so good, but I'm gonna let Angry Man handle that. And Kendra D. They got that. They've done a pretty good job of it. I know that biologically speaking, the hyena is either being a male hyena is either the most stressful or the second most stressful situation to be in the wild. Based on the measurements of cortisol levels in the blood, it's some kind of baboon and some kind of hyena. They're the ones that are one and two, and I can't remember the exact order, but yeah, being a male hyena sucks. Really does. Truth be told, if I was a male hyena, um, because they can scavenge, I think I just hunt what I can and scavenge what I can. I'd leave the lions alone, wouldn't really pester them and wouldn't bother them, and I wouldn't be messing around with the female hyenas either. If I was a male hyena, just stay by myself. Because they really are. I mean, when you look at the natural documentaries on the lives of hyenas, they really are ratchet. They truly are, and that's largely because bullying is tolerated by the parents. The parents will let a cub kill the other cubs, and they will raise that cub to kill the others. No sense of cooperation. And they can hunt. That's the thing people don't realize. Hyenas are capable of hunting, and they do it at times. They just scavenge a lot more. But I'll let them handle that. At the end of the day, we have to understand that we do have to point the fingers and we got to go in on enemies. It's true. But we got to so every so often just broadcast some appreciation for the allies, for the ones that are not screwing things up. It's just that they're not enough to go around, and it's good for us because it will remind us that they do exist. The problem is not that they're nowhere to be found. The problem is that they're simply outnumbered, but they're not the enemies. And to a certain extent, they get silenced as well. When they're identified by other women, they get silenced. How dare you say these things in their favor? What's wrong with you? Girl, you just a pick me. You a sucker. You a sellout. You need to go on ahead and just go in on them. They ain't done nothing for you. The other thing too was this. This is exactly why it is that I said in my last one that we got to have a game plan. And I'm aware that SYSBM has a tenant. I want to thank Off Grid and On Code for reminding me of the tenant, that we keep in touch. SYSBM keep in touch with each other. And I'm not assuming that I am. Like I said, I may not qualify, but I'm definitely a passport brother. And passport brothers also have to take this. Keep in touch. But I wasn't really sure that this was designed specifically so that the daughters that are either short, they were born shortly ago and they're growing up, or they have yet to be born, but the daughters of us, passport brothers and SYSBM brothers, would have options because, see, the ones that have yet to come up, that are the daughters of the passport brothers and the SYSBM brothers, they're innocent. They're going to be innocent. We're going to raise them to be innocent. Even those of us that may have done the closest thing to SYSBM inside of the Matrix by either marrying one of these few that you really were able to nab up, if you were lucky enough to find them, or by marrying someone that simply came from abroad and had not gotten corrupted, or by leaving, if you were able to leaving. The daughters are not guilty until they join in the guilt and participate in the problem. And as I said, we are not here to shun anyone because of the phenotype. We're not here to shun any innocent women. I can't say that I extend that to whites because of fear, mostly, and safety. But we are not shunning the black woman because of the phenotype. So the ones of them that actually are innocent and have not done anything like this, regardless of what their nature is, when they don't make the immoral decisions, we don't have a reason to shun them. But this also by extension applies to the little ones that we're going to raise who simply are growing up in colorist nations that are maybe even more colorist than black America is. They're not raised to be ratchet. They don't have to worry about learning only ratchet stuff. Being stripper is not going to be justified and glorified, let alone glorified and glamorized. That's not the case. Get the bag, sis, get the bag, sis, is not going to be one of their mantras. That's not the case. With them, they haven't, I mean, hell, most of them, they were just recently born or they have not yet been born yet. We're not out to ruin it for them because these are the ones that you're going to conceive and raise. Wherever their mothers come from, they're going to get the black blood from you. And this is why it is that I say we give a shout out. We're not here to punish the innocent for what the guilty did. We're here to punish the guilty. Really, it's not even about vengeance when I talk about punishment. We're really just stepping aside and letting the guilty turn until letting the guilty find nobody to punish but themselves and each other. That's really what we're doing. Really, that's it. We're letting this fire find no fuel so that it now can only consume itself. That's what we're doing. We're stepping aside. But it's not about, and although they're going to be innocent ones that are already grown and they're in the States, they may wind up suffering. In Canada and the UK and the United States, they may wind up with that too. And that they're going to be them, but that wasn't something we could necessarily prevent because we don't necessarily know all of where they are. And they don't have a stamp on their forehead by which we can know them. But even for them to be able to prevent that, the best thing would be for them to actually be willing to leave. And frankly, you can't expect that from most women in general, good or bad. I mean, that's the litmus test, but let's just be honest. Really, a lot of the bad ones would be more willing to bounce than the good ones. That's unfortunate, but we're not here to penalize them. We're not here to exclude them. And if we're not here to exclude the grown ones that contributed to the solution and not the problem, then how can we be here to exclude our own daughters that we're actually going to raise to be even better in the first place? Now, for those of you who are going to do this and you already know some other guys like you and they got sons and you can match them up and they're going to agree to this, that's fine. But if you've found your opportunity, but your opportunity was not necessarily close to a bunch of others who have sons, and you got a daughter, then it means you may have to look to the local population for your son-in-law. And that's why it is that I just wanted to make sure that we focused on areas wherein the men were going to be the least willing if you had to draw from that pool. That's all. And I really can't speak about where that's going to be except the continent. And Abdullah bin Bobby had a good idea. He said, I'd rather raise some orphans myself and hope that they'll, trust them to be good son-in-laws. And that's the Muslim idea, because you would raise an orphan. If you raise them separate from your own children of the opposite gender anyway. And so they don't develop that sibling bond because they're not siblings. And then this allows them the option to tie the knot if they choose to. But I can't really say that's what's going on nowadays. I can't say that. What I can say is that unfortunately, a whole lot of in the West, a whole lot of sisters are trying to platonize a whole lot of brothers from a young age. That's my buddy. That's my play brother. I know that happens a lot. And then they get older and they cannot marry these guys. I know that goes on a good bit. But maybe not anymore. It happened when I was growing up. I saw it. But for the most part, all I'm really getting at is that we want to give a shout out to the ones that are holding it down. They're doing their part. I'm not saying they got to do his part too. I'm just saying we give a shout out to the ones that are doing their parts, and they're not messing things up. I would say to them, you probably need to come out with a stronger voice and condemn the ratchets. I'm not necessarily exonerating you for that, but a lot of times a lot of them may not even know about this because they're not on social media, so they may not know the depths of the dysfunction elsewhere. They may know it exists, but not necessarily the depths of it. How bad it's getting. They may not know that there is such a thing as this manosphere and this rhetoric. They may really not know. We want to give a shout out to them. And if you know them, you can do it by name, privately or publicly. But we do want to do this. We do want to be sure about one thing, and that is that we're simply being fair to the innocent ones that we can identify. That's all. You ain't going to always know who's innocent and guilty, but when you can identify either one, it's a good thing to make sure you're being fair to them. Even of the guilty, if you're going to penalize them, the punishment should fit the crime, shouldn't exceed it. But that's not what this talk is about, and most of you aren't doing that anyway because your punishment is simply to step aside and, let the foolishness kill itself, which is fine and wise. You don't really need that lecture about how to be fair to even the guilty, but to the innocent when you can identify them, yeah, we all got to work on that. That's just it's just human to forget that at times. Much like the teacher who was surrounded by the guilty that are fussing and arguing with them, they really can't see through that wall to know who stayed in their chair and wasn't disruptive and was uninvolved. It's a hard thing for anyone. I think I've talked enough. Thank you for being patient. And I hope this message benefits. The blackest man on social media signing black off. Assalamu alaikum.